For the majority of the past few months, the focus has been on those in the playoff cut line, the guys who are right there within 30 or so points, give or take at any given time, as well as those who have already won. But this week's Daytona, and this is the week that we can look at drivers who not only aren't in that battle and haven't won a race, but are not going to be anywhere near that battle and in a must-win scenario heading into the World Center of Racing. So I want to look at some of these underdogs and see which one has the best chance, and I don't know, maybe you can win some money off them. Starting out, let's look at Todd Gilliland. He led the most laps in the opening two combined races of the year, and those were at Daytona and Atlanta. Based on that alone, you would think that Todd Gilliland would be a lock to put on your fantasy team, put some money on, and to vie for the win when it comes to this race at Daytona. The problem? He's DNF'd every cup race he's ever run in at Daytona. The dude can lead laps. Front row is more than capable of putting a winning race car out there in super speedway settings. The problem is he just can't stay out of trouble, and when you DNF every single cup race at Daytona you run, I can't put faith in you to last to the finish to get that win. Now, his teammate Michael McDowell might be a bit of a different story. This guy was less than half a mile away from victory at Talladega this past spring. He had the race in control until a masterful move from those drafting behind him, and with just about anyone else but Brad Keselowski kind of setting up the draft behind him, I think he wins this race. So I do think that front row brings that kind of car to Daytona. He's had 2 lead lap finishes in the last 5 next-gen Daytona races, all 5 of them, but he has struggled generally to run up front when it comes to the finish. He can still run there during the race, but as of late, Daytona has been a bit unlucky for old McDowell. Also, looking at Noah Gragson, he's one that intrigues me. He actually has 2 top 10s in his 3 next-gen races at Daytona. He's been fairly good in these races. He was 9th in the 500 as well. He was able to stay out of trouble and have a fast car and run up front. And in general, Fords have been very strong at super speedways. We talked about the last 2 here. The first 2 that we talked about are Ford drivers, and there's going to be Ford drivers like the RFK duo, for instance, that will be running up front and running for the win. It's very likely that Ford can finish 1-2 in this race, regardless of which duo it is. So that intrigues me a lot. Also, Noah Gragson ran pretty fast in his Xfinity career at super speedway races. He wasn't the best out there at any given point, but he was always one of the best. And if that translates to a cup race with good cars, well, I think he could give Stewart-Haas Racing their last win. The man I'm most intrigued by heading into this race, though, is Kyle Busch. And I'm not saying most intrigued out of this video, I mean in the entire field. Kyle Busch last week kind of looked like himself. Ran fast, led laps, competed for the win, even if strategy had to be used for it. But in general, it was Kyle Busch again. And I think that in the next-gen era, he's been one of the most consistent guys at Daytona International Speedway, with finishes of 6th, 10th, 19th, 7th, and 12th. He led every single one of those races as well. He won the Talladega Spring Race last year, so he has the ability not only to run up front in these races, but lead and win these races. RCR is still very strong at tracks like Daytona and Talladega. He finished in that really close finish at Atlanta, finishing 3rd, but in most aspects would have been the 2nd place finisher. So he has that speed. He's shown the speed this year. I think Kyle Busch not only is the favorite from this video to talk about winning at Daytona this weekend, but he might be the favorite or one of the 3 favorites in the field at large. Kyle Busch is going to be a factor, and I truly think that he will have the mentality of checkers or wreckers. Bring home the trophy or the steering wheel. Rowdy could get it done for the 20th straight year at now Daytona. And a twist of fate that I totally meant to happen here, we'll follow Kyle Busch up with Ricky Stenhouse. Stenhouse is the winner of the 2023 Daytona 500, so he has that in his catalog. He has also, in his career, been one of the most consistent and fastest at super speedways. his wins are at super speedways. And that's not really a knock on him. He's just been really good at this type of racing, and he's been good in general over his career of staying out of the majority of trouble. He always has been fast in these tracks, but the win that he had in the Daytona 500 last year was the only one of the last 5 Daytona races he's ran that he didn't DNF. I think Stenhouse can run up front. I think he can get stage points. I think he can compete for the win if he stays out of it. The likelihood of that, though, is very low based on previous races. But Stenhouse needs to be watched still. Now, I know this guy might not be the most popular for fans right now, but Austin Dillon is somebody that I'm going to be watching. He won this race 2 years ago. Granted, it was a bit of a lucky win, and he was nowhere near contention in it beforehand, but a win is a win, and that needs to be remembered. Problem is, that win in the next-gen era is the only race where he finished above 25th at Daytona. RCR is fast at super speedways. The cars should be there for him, but Dillon has not delivered. And a fluky Richmond race that still ended up in not qualifying him for the playoffs, as of recording this, is not something that I look at when it comes to Austin Dillon turning a corner in his career in general. Dillon is someone I'll watch, but I'll watch him for different reasons. I'll just say that. The penultimate driver I want to watch too is Corey LaJoie. He's been up and down at Daytona, but he's currently actually on an upward swing. 10th last year and 4th in the Daytona 500 this year, 2 straight top 10 finishes. He's solid at all super speedway races. You can always see him running near the front or leading these races. And, well, he's just always in the mix. And when you're in the mix at Daytona, Talladega, or now Atlanta, you can get the win. If LaJoie just doesn't screw it up for himself or get collected in someone else's mess, he very well could punch his ticket in the playoffs after a pretty terrible year. And then lastly, let's look at John Hunter Nemechek. In his 3 career races at Daytona, he's finished 11th, 11th, and 7th. He has been not the greatest, but he's been able to stay out of trouble. And when you have an average finish inside the top 10 in more than 2 races at Daytona, I actually am kind of impressed by that. Toyota also be a major factor in this race. Toyota cars have been great at super speedways. It's almost like they were designed to be great at super speedways. And they're just fast in the draft, no matter where they're at, leading or behind. The only question I have for all the Toyotas this weekend is, are there team orders to get the 23 and the 54 up to the front, leading laps, winning the race, and finishing up top? If that's the case, he will not take priority over Bubba Wallace or Ty Gibbs. Now, those are the guys that I really am going to keep an eye on. There's others that are kind of mysteries, but you don't really know what to make of them. Obviously, they're a mystery. Rookies like Josh Berry or Carson Hocevar, Zane Smith. Low experience drivers on these tracks and in this series like Daniel Hemrick. SVG coming up and racing this weekend. This full 40-car field is going to be one full of mystery and, in my opinion, a lot of topsy-turvy moving that I don't think we've seen in recent Daytona races. So with that, I want to ask you, who do you think wins at Daytona? A favorite, an underdog, someone in the middle, or do we see something crazy with rain? Let me know what you think in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more great and fun NASCAR content. Thank you so much, all my channel members, for your continued support. And be sure to watch NWP tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Danny B Talks channel. We'll talk about this and everything else in the world of NASCAR. So until then, have a good one.